So I just wanted to take a look at something that a lot of people have been having trouble with, and that's the Smart Extrude, which is not. I wouldn't recommend using it in the way that you would normally think about using an extrude. The problem is, and a lot of people see this as a bug, and it kind of is, but it's kind of not. So what the main complaint is that you go in here, you hold down Shift, and if you don't have it on, hold down W, and you can go to Smart Extrude, right? And you extrude the surface, right? And then you go here and you go over to your divisions and you try your divisions and this is what happens. And everybody's like, this thing is broken, it sucks, Maya sucks, throw it all away, right? Well, that's not exactly what's happening. So the problem that's happening is that when you do the smart extrude, you're actually doing two separate operations. You're first doing an extrude and then you're doing a poly tweak, which is different from a normal extrude where you're actually using the channels on the extrude to change the values. And I'll show you what I mean. Let me delete this and we'll create a plane from scratch. I'm going to delete it, freeze it, and delete this history. And on this first one, what I'm going to do is just use the extrude command. That's Shift, right mouse button, and I'm using the manipulator that it creates. This is not the move manipulator. I know that sounds really weird because it looks exactly like it, but you see that it's got, you know, something for rotation, it's got something for scale, and it's got something for translation. That's because you're actually affecting the channels. It also has this thing here, which is called the in-view editor, or IVE. And you notice when I move this, that value changes. And I can also, I hold down Control and slide on it for slower movements. This is either fast movements or really fast movements using Shift. So if I go down here, let's put it back to like say 1. Oh, where'd it go? That's 1. Let's try 0.5. Okay, cool. And then I do that again. I just did it really quick, basically. Again, I'm affecting the operations. And if I go down here to my divisions now, I can add divisions. And if I look at the history of my object, I only have 2 extrude face on there. That's all it is. I haven't done any other operations to this. So if you think about it in procedural modeling, we really are just taking, here's our shape, right? And actually, let me get rid of time slider and range slider, bring this up a little bit. All right, so we have our poly surface, it's getting extruded again, and that's our output shape. Put a shader on it. And that's all we've done to this surface. So if I go in here and change any of these values, like add divisions, maybe do an offset, local translate X, local direction Y, let's see, local scale, all 3, whatever. And I go to the other poly extrude that also works, right? So divisions, and I'm not going to use these guys. I'm going to use the local scales, right? And all that does what we expected to do. Move this to the side. Now what I'm going to do is create another plane. Again, delete its history. I'm going to create a new node graph here. And I'm going to use Smart Extrude, which is kind of a misnomer. So I'll hold down Shift and do a drag here. And by default, everything looks fine, right? If I go and do another one, take a look at what it does. And it adds to my history. So now in my history, I have this thing called PolyTweak 1. What the hell is that? Basically what that is when I move a face just by dragging it, that's a poly tweak. And that's what's happening in this situation. So that poly tweak doesn't go into the history correctly. And let's see here if I can, all right, yeah. So it's doing a couple weird things. So here's our original object shape node. Here's the input polymesh to another polymesh. But you see I have a plane shape over here. And this is my poly extrude, this is my poly tweak, this is my poly extrude, and there's my plane shape. And that's kind of weird. Why is it reflexively going back to itself? I don't know. But the end result is, if I go in here now and try and run divisions, that's not correct. And if I go to here, my poly extrude face, and I run divisions, really not correct. And it's because that poly tweak doesn't really jive with the rest of the procedural modeling workflow. It doesn't know what to do with that. To give you an example, let's do it one more time. Basically what you're doing is I go extrude, hit W, and now move. I'll do that again. Extrude, hit W for move, and move it again. and you see I get the same history: poly extrude, poly tweak, poly extrude, and that's where things get all screwed up. When you do a regular extrude, whoops, a regular extrude like so, whoops, I'll go, and if you instantly, if you drop your extrude your tool and you want to go back to it, you can always select the extrude. Here, I'll go to a group mode so you can see it. So I'm in object mode. I'll select that poly extrude face and I'll hit T. That's going to give you a manipulator and your IVE. So now I can go in here and, whoops, offset it and give it some divisions, right? That's what you want to do if you want to treat it as a procedural model. If you don't care and you just want to, like, you know, pull, I do it so rarely. You just want to pull some faces out, sure, do it. But don't expect that to be procedural. It's going to get all these poly tweaks in there. Those poly tweak nodes are not procedural. Another thing you can do if you want to stay procedural is I will do my poly extrude, and you can actually use a transform mesh. So I believe it's under, I always forget where it is. I think it's under edit mesh, transform, yeah. So I could just do transform face, and that's going to move that. And if you take a look at your history here, these are actually two history nodes, procedural modeling history nodes. So I've actually not tried this, but let's see what happens. If I go in here to divisions, now the funny thing is you don't see any difference, and the reason for that is because they're all right on top of each other. Because remember, I never translated this. So if I go to my local translate Z, we get what looks like a movement on there, and then I'll do my divisions, and you see I get my divisions in there. And they're only going to reach up to that certain point, and what that certain point is then what happens is my poly move face moves the poly. So it's just that second part of the procedural history. So in result, like the smart extrude is great for fast, quick blocking stuff out, but don't treat it as a you know, a procedural modeler, because that poly tweak node is not going to let you that happen. However, you know, if you do get into a situation where you're like, you know what, I pulled this out, and I pulled this out, and I pulled it out again, oops, and then I grab these guys and I pull them out, oops. See, I don't like it. I don't use it. Let's try if I scale it from there. That could be interesting. And then, yeah, I don't like that either. Let's okay. Point being, so say I have this here and I want to add some detail in there that I didn't have before. I can just go in there and grab those edges, and I use the connect components tool. And what's kind of cool about that is, well, you all know about edge flow already, right? So I can just do that, hit G, G, whoops, make sure you go all the way through, G, 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 and add those edges really quickly. And if you're using something like that, you know, just go in there and delete your history, because you're not going to want to keep that around. Hope that makes sense and kind of clears up the area a little bit about what's going on with the smart extrude. If you have any questions or whatever, let me know. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Thanks. Bye.